Welcome to the deep dive. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on future deep dives. And make sure to click that notification bell.
Yeah.
Today we are diving deep into citizen charters.
Okay.
Whether you're a UPSC aspirant, a student, or just someone who wants government services to run a bit smoother, this one's for you. We've got research papers, expert analysis, all prepped and ready to unpack.
I think what's fascinating about citizen charters is this idea that it's not a new thing.
Right.
It actually has a history. Goes all the way back to 1991 Britain.
Okay, so rewind the clock for us.
Yeah.
1991 Britain, what was happening there that gave birth to this concept?
Well, you have John Major as the prime minister, and there's this kind of a sense that public services needed a shakeup. A way to make them more accountable to the people.
Yeah.
And so Citizen Charters was born. This national program was a bold move to set clear standards. Standards for how the government should be treating its citizens.
So it was about more than just politicians making promises. It was about putting those promises into a framework, something concrete that citizens could hold the government to.
Exactly. It wasn't just a slogan. It was about setting standards. Standards for things like how long should services actually take? What should that process look like? And what happens if, things go wrong? What recourse do citizens have?
Right.
And it caught on. In 1998, Tony Blair's government doubled down on it, rebranding it as Services First.
So they weren't messing around. They really wanted to make this concept of citizen-centric governance a reality.
They did, yeah.
But we're not in Britain, so how did this concept make its way to India?
Well, you have to think about the changes happening in India at the time.
Okay.
Economic growth was picking up, literacy rates were rising, and with that came, a more empowered citizenry. People were becoming more aware of their rights.
Right.
And starting to demand better from their government.
So there was this perfect storm brewing. You have a government looking to improve its image, and citizens who are increasingly aware of their power to demand better services.
Exactly. And it all culminated in a key moment, the Conference of Chief Ministers in 1997,
Okay.
spearheaded by the Prime Minister. And this is where India formally adopted citizen charters, as a tool for effective and responsive governance.
This is where it gets interesting for our UPSC aspirants out there, anyone who's just really interested in Indian governance.
Yeah.
So India didn't just copy and paste the British model. They adapted, right?
Yeah, it did, yeah.
So what were some of the core principles that shaped India's unique take on citizen charters?
Well, one of the key principles was this idea of tangible standards.
Okay.
So instead of vague promises, citizen charters were supposed to spell out exactly what citizens could expect from a particular service. So think things like, how long should it take to get a passport renewed?
Yeah.
What are the steps involved in applying for a business license? So transparency and predictability were the goals.
So no more standing in endless lines with no idea what's going on or when you'll actually get help.
In theory, yes. And another core principle was information transparency.
Yeah.
Citizen charters aim to make information about government services easily accessible to everyone. This meant things like making the criteria for accessing a service really clear, laying out any fees involved, and explaining the process for lodging a complaint if things go wrong.
That makes sense. If citizens know what they're entitled to, how the system works, they're better equipped to actually navigate it effectively. And more importantly, hold the government accountable. But principles are one thing, action is another. So how are citizen charters actually put into practice? What does that process look like?
Well, there's a 4-step process that underpins an effective citizen charter. And it all starts with understanding who you're serving. The first step is actually identifying the key stakeholders, the citizens, who are most affected by that particular service. This could be students, senior citizens, entrepreneurs, anyone who regularly interacts with that specific government department.
So before you even start drafting the charter, you need to really understand the needs and expectations of the people who are going to be using it.
Exactly. Once you have a clear understanding of who you're serving, then you move on to step 2, which is the policy formulation. This is where you actually design the citizen charter itself.
Okay.
You clearly lay out service standards, timeframes for delivery, and those all-important grievance redressal mechanisms.
It sounds like this is a very collaborative process, bringing policymakers and citizens together to craft something that works for everyone.
Ideally, yes. Step 3 is about developing that practical framework
Okay.
for delivering those services outlined in the charter. This could mean streamlining existing processes, upgrading infrastructure, or even training staff to be more efficient and citizen-centric.
So it's not just a document hanging on the wall. It's about actually making tangible changes in how things are done, how services are delivered.
Precisely.
What's the final step in this process?
The final step, arguably the most crucial, is establishing a solid feedback mechanism.
Okay.
That means creating ways for citizens to actually share their experiences, good and bad,
Right.
and then using that feedback to constantly refine and improve those services.
So it's about acknowledging that no system is perfect and building in a process for continuous improvement.
Exactly.
That's where that accountability we talked about earlier really kicks in, right?
Yes.
If citizens have a way to voice their concerns and actually see that feedback lead to concrete changes, it can really build trust in the system.
Yeah.
But let's be real, even with the best of intentions, there are always challenges. So what are some of the hurdles that citizen charters face in the real world?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is inconsistent adoption.
Okay.
Not all government departments have fully embraced the citizen charter concept, and even those that have might not be implementing it effectively.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
It is, unfortunately.
Some departments are all in, while others are lagging behind.
Yes, and even when a department is on board, there's this issue of vague commitments.
Right.
You know, some charters lack specific, measurable standards. They promise excellent service,
Right.
but don't define what that means in practical terms.
That's frustrating. It makes it difficult to hold anyone accountable if the standards are open to interpretation. Are there any other roadblocks we should be aware of?
Another major challenge is a lack of awareness.
Okay.
You know, many citizens might not even know citizen charters exist. And those who do might not know how to access them or how to use the complaint mechanisms
Right.
if they need to. And on the government side, staff might not be adequately trained on the charter's principles and procedures.
So it's not just about having a good policy. It's about making sure everyone involved understands it and knows how to actually use it effectively. And this lack of awareness can, sometimes lead to a lack of trust as well.
Yes.
If citizens don't see the charter making a real difference in their lives, they're less likely to engage with it or even believe that it can bring about positive change.
Yes, that's true.
So we have this potential solution in citizen charters, but there are some serious obstacles to overcome. Before we move on, I'd like to remind our listeners to hit that like button and subscribe if you're enjoying the show. And don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified when new episodes drop.
Yes.
Coming up, we'll explore some expert recommendations for overcoming these challenges and making citizen charters even more effective. Stay with us.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to the deep dive. Before we went away, we were just talking about how citizen charters, while a great idea in principle, face some real-world hurdles.
Right. We were digging into those challenges, things like inconsistent adoption, vague commitments, lack of awareness that can really hinder the effectiveness of these charters. But it's not all doom and gloom, is it? I mean, there have to be ways to overcome these obstacles to make citizen charters actually work better for everyone.
Absolutely. And that's where these expert recommendations come in. Organizations like the Indian Institute of Public Administration, or IIPA, and the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, ARC, have done a lot of research.
Right.
And they've come up with some really insightful suggestions.
Okay, so let's jump into those recommendations. What does the IEPA suggest? What's their take on how to make citizen charters more effective?
One of their key recommendations is to involve citizens and staff in the entire process.
Okay.
So from the initial design of the charter all the way through to its implementation and evaluation, having that buy-in from both sides is crucial.
So it's about fostering a sense of ownership, making sure that both citizens and government employees feel like they're actually part of the solution.
Exactly. When people feel like they've had a say in shaping the charter, they're more likely to support it and hold each other accountable. And this is especially crucial in the Indian context where, trust in government institutions can sometimes be fragile.
Right.
So if citizens are involved in that process from the outset, it can really help build that trust and create a more collaborative relationship between the government and the people it serves.
It makes a lot of sense. If you're going to ask people to buy into something, let them be part of building it from the ground up.
Yeah.
What else does the IPA emphasize?
Another crucial recommendation is comprehensive staff training. Government employees need to understand not just what the Citizen Charter says, but why it's important. They need to internalize the principles behind it and be equipped to actually deliver on those promises.
So it's about going beyond just ticking boxes. It's about empowering government staff to be true advocates for the charter and to actually see themselves as agents of change.
Exactly. And this training should include things like, effective communication skills, conflict resolution techniques, and a deep understanding of the needs of the citizens they're serving. It's about creating a culture of service where those government employees are truly invested in delivering high-quality, citizen-centric services.
Okay, so we've got citizen involvement and staff training. What other nuggets of wisdom does the IAPA offer?
Well, they also highlight the need for a robust grievance redressal mechanism. This means having a clear, accessible, and efficient system for citizens to actually lodge complaints if the service standards aren't met.
Okay.
And just as importantly, it means creating a database to actually track these grievances and using that data to drive those improvements.
So it's not just about collecting complaints, it's about actually analyzing them, identifying patterns, and using that information to fix systemic problems.
That's right. By actually analyzing grievance data, departments can pinpoint specific areas where they're falling short and come up with targeted solutions. It's a way to make the system more responsive and accountable to the needs of the citizens it's meant to serve. The IIPA also recommends a charter mark scheme.
Okay.
So this would involve recognizing and rewarding those departments that consistently meet or exceed the standards laid out in their citizen charters.
I like that idea. A little healthy competition can be a great motivator, right?
It can.
It's like saying, hey, if you're doing a great job serving your citizens, we're going to acknowledge that and give you props. Now, let's shift gears a bit and look at what the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, ARC, has to say.
Yeah.
Do they echo any of the IPA's recommendations, or do they bring something new to the table?
Well, the ARC definitely builds on some of the IIPA's ideas, but they bring some fresh perspectives to the discussion as well. For example, they emphasize the need for what they call context-specific citizen charters.
Okay.
Their mantra is, one size does not fit all.
Okay, so explain that a little bit more. What do they mean by context-specific?
Well, they argue that, a citizen charter for a rural healthcare center is going to have very different needs and priorities than a charter for, say, a passport office in a big city.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You can't just use a generic template and expect it to work effectively in every situation.
So it's about being flexible and adaptable.
Exactly. The ARC also emphasizes the importance of bringing those civil society organizations into the fold.
Okay.
They believe that these organizations have a really deep understanding of the needs and the challenges faced by specific communities, making them really valuable partners in developing and implementing effective citizen charters.
So it's about tapping into the expertise and insights of those who actually work directly with the people who are most affected by these services.
Right. Civil society organizations can bring valuable on-the-ground experience to the table. They can help ensure that the charter is relevant, practical, and really responsive to the needs of the community that it's designed to serve.
That's a great point. It's about building bridges and recognizing that good governance requires collaboration and partnership. What other gems of wisdom does the ARC offer? What else do they suggest to make citizen charters more effective?
Well, one of their key recommendations is to establish clear accountability measures and benchmarks. This means identifying specific individuals who are responsible for upholding the standards that are outlined in the charter, and then regularly evaluating their performance against those benchmarks.
So it's not just about saying, here's the charter, go make it happen. It's about putting systems in place to actually track progress, identify areas for improvement, and hold people accountable for their actions.
Exactly. The ARC also recommends using end-user feedback as a key metric for evaluating the effectiveness of citizen charters. After all, citizen satisfaction is the ultimate goal.
Right. If citizens are happy with the services that they're receiving, that's a pretty good indicator that the charter is working.
Yeah.
It all comes back to putting the citizen at the center of the process.
Absolutely. And this actually ties back to that collaborative approach that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
By involving citizens in the design, the implementation, and the evaluation of citizen charters, you're creating a feedback loop that ensures the system is constantly adapting and improving to meet the evolving needs of the people it serves.
This has been a really insightful discussion. We've covered a lot of ground from the historical roots of citizen charters to the challenges that they face and some really, potential solutions. But I think we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore, especially when it comes to translating these recommendations into tangible change on the ground.
You're right. The real work begins with implementation. And that's what we'll delve into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll look at specific examples of citizen charters in action, both successes and failures. And we'll discuss how to move beyond theory and make these charters a truly effective tool for good governance.
Stay tuned, listeners. We're just getting warmed up. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring citizen charters, their history, their promise, and those challenges they face. Yeah. But, the proof is in the pudding. How do we move beyond all this theory and make these charters work?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Like it is?
I think the answer lies in a fundamental shift in perspective. We need to stop thinking of citizen charters as just another bureaucratic hoop to jump through and start seeing them as genuine tools for empowerment, both for citizens and for the government staff who deliver those services.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this empowerment angle. How do we flip the script and make citizen charters a force for positive change?
Well, imagine a scenario where citizen charters aren't just documents gathering dust on a shelf, but living, breathing frameworks that guide every interaction between citizens and the government. This means going beyond just listing service standards and actually involving citizens in setting those standards, in monitoring performance, and in holding the government accountable.
So it's about creating a genuine partnership where citizens aren't just passive recipients of services, but active participants in shaping those services to meet their needs.
Exactly. Think of it as a two-way street. Citizens provide input on what matters most to them, and the government responds by designing services that truly meet those needs. And it's not just about citizen input, it's also about empowering government staff to take ownership of the charter and be proactive in finding those solutions.
That's a really crucial point. It's about fostering that culture where government employees feel valued, respected, and empowered to make a real difference. But how do we actually cultivate that kind of environment within, often rigid bureaucratic structures?
Well, one powerful approach is to shift the focus from punishment to positive reinforcement. Instead of always looking for who to blame when things go wrong, let's start celebrating and rewarding those who go above and beyond to deliver that exceptional service. This could involve public recognition, career advancement opportunities, or even financial incentives.
So it's about creating a system where excellence is not only expected, but actively encouraged and rewarded. It's about tapping into that intrinsic motivation where government employees are driven by a sense of pride and purpose in serving the public.
Precisely. And when employees feel valued and empowered, they're more likely to be innovative and proactive in finding solutions to those challenges. They become problem solvers, not just rule followers.
Well, this brings us back to the core of what citizen charters are all about, right? Making government work better for everyone.
It does.
But let's be honest, changing these deeply ingrained bureaucratic mindsets is a Herculean task.
Yeah.
What are some practical steps that we can take to kind of nudge this shift in the right direction?
One crucial step is to invest in those comprehensive training programs for government staff. And these programs should go beyond just explaining the contents of the citizen charter. They should focus on fostering that customer-centric mindset, equipping employees with the skills to communicate effectively with citizens and empowering them to make those decisions that benefit the public.
So it's about moving away from that "this is how it's always been done" mentality and embracing a culture of continuous improvement.
Exactly. Another important step is to simplify and streamline those bureaucratic processes. Often, the biggest barrier to effective service delivery isn't a lack of willingness, but just that labyrinth of red tape and outdated procedures.
The dreaded red tape. It can be a real obstacle course for both citizens and government employees. How do we cut through that red tape and make things easier for everyone?
Technology can play a huge role here. Digitizing processes, creating online portals for accessing services, establishing those centralized grievance redressal systems can significantly reduce the time and effort required to actually navigate government bureaucracy.
And that's where that value for money principle we discussed earlier comes in.
It does.
By leveraging technology, we can not only improve efficiency, but also reduce costs. A win-win for everyone involved.
Absolutely. And technology can also enhance transparency and accountability. Online tracking systems for applications and services can provide citizens with those real-time updates on the status of their requests, eliminating that uncertainty and frustration of endless waiting.
That's a game changer. It gives citizens a sense of control and allows them to actually hold the government accountable for meeting those promised timelines. But let's not forget the human element, right? Technology can be a powerful tool. but it can never fully replace the importance of human interaction, empathy, and understanding.
You're absolutely right. At the end of the day, the success of citizen charters hinges on fostering that culture of mutual respect and collaboration between citizens and government staff. It's about recognizing that everyone involved has that shared goal to create a system that works effectively and efficiently for the benefit of all.
This has been a truly insightful deep dive.
It has.
We've explored the evolution of citizen charters, unpacked their guiding principles, examined the challenges they face, and delved into some truly inspiring solutions.
Huh.
So, what's the takeaway for our listeners? What do we want them to walk away with today?
Well, the key takeaway is this. Citizen charters have the potential to be really powerful tools for positive change.
Right.
But it's up to all of us, citizens and government alike, to work together to make that potential a reality. And it requires that commitment to transparency, to accountability, and to continuous improvement.
And that brings us to the heart of what the deep dive is all about. Empowering you with knowledge and inspiring you to think critically about the world around you. As we wrap up today's episode, we encourage you to explore the citizen charters that are relevant to your own lives. Engage with the process, hold your government accountable, and demand better services. Remember, the power to create a more responsive and effective government lies in all of us.
That's right. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time.